Good evening, everyone. Thank you for tuning in today. In this video, I am going to talk to you about the magical powers or the magical world of the occultists who formed our understanding of the cosmos. Copernicus, Isaac Newton, Galileo, Kepler, and the rest. Let us now dive straight into this discussion. But before then, please remember to subscribe and click the bell icon so you will not miss any updates on this channel. Thank you. Galileo is quoted as saying that where our senses fail us, reason stepped in. However, Galileo made astrological charts for rich people. It seems throughout history, scientific geniuses such as Galileo, Newton, and others have believed in completely fantastic things, from astrology, alchemy, to straight-up magic and witchcraft. They have not only practiced, but have incorporated them into all of their widely popular theories of modernity. For example, the theory of gravity was drawn from a magical principle called the magic law of attraction. Witches believe that magic is a way of attracting lovers, bringing luck, banishing evil spirits, fortune, and more. According to one witch, magic is something we use to help us get what we want or need. This bizarre idea seemed very valid to many of these so-called men of science. However, we have the benefit of hindsight today. We know that scientific principles should come from rationality and other observations that can be tested and repeated. The Big Bang Theory, gravity forming the universe, and the ever-expanding universe are all ideas that cannot be observed or repeated. They are merely theories formed from the compromised minds of men who were heavily influenced by occult doctrines. Galileo, who lived between 1564 and 1642, is held up as the paragon of rationality. He advocated a heliocentric cosmos, the idea that the sun, not the earth, is at the center of the universe. This, of course, was an idea that was rejected by the early church because of the Genesis account. However, Galileo was determined to convert all Christians to this new view of God's creation. It is from this observation that Jude writes, "For there are certain men crept in unawares, who were before of old ordained to this condemnation, ungodly men turning the grace of God into lasciviousness, and denying the only Lord God and our Lord Jesus Christ." Jude chapter 1 verse 4. It is proven from recorded history that Galileo was somewhat of a fortune teller. Although history records that Galileo did not believe in astrology, he nonetheless practiced it, conducting readings for wealthy clients. That is quite unscientific for a so-called man of rationality science. However, the truth is revealed in the light of a man's action. Galileo taught many medical students the act of reading astrological charts as well, and based their sources as doctors on their understanding of astrology. Galileo wasn't alone in keeping up on his science. His contemporaries, such as Kepler, conducted his own astrological studies. I am sure it is surprising to know that many of these men who were the founders of science were involved in occult practices because we only know them in the context of mathematics and rationality. However, Isaac Newton, who lived between 1642 and 1726, the founder of gravity and theories of motion, was also somewhat of a magician. John Maynard called Isaac Newton the last of the great magicians. Newton spent half of his life obsessed with alchemy. Alchemy was a transformative magic. Newton had hopes of using this magic to change metals into gold. In 1700, he was made the master over the royal mints. In his new position, he tried repeatedly to use magic to divine metals into gold. He felt, could men be so heavily involved in the occult be trusted to assimilate theories about the true nature of the world in which we live? Robert Boyle is considered the father of chemistry, yet he too dabbled into alchemy, magic. He was so committed to the alchemy cause that he fought to make alchemy legal. He was unsuccessful because alchemy was considered witchcraft. Then Tycho Brahe, who lived between 1546 and 1601, Newton and Galileo were also interested in the stars, astrology, and magic. Tycho Brahe created his own model of the universe. He had catalogued more than 1,000 stars. He also convinced everyone he was a sorcerer. He did all this from his own private sorcerer's island. Tycho Brahe was fantastically wealthy. He built multiple observatories and had a squad of astronomical assistants. Tycho uses many tricks to make himself appear to have magical powers. One author stated that he created and used tiny robots to convince the lookers that he was a sorcerer. However, he is the man who we know or whom we credit for creating one of the first conceptual drawings of our universe. This was the same man who had his nose partly sliced off in a duel and got his pet moons drunk at parties. Even though Brahe was a depraved man of the occult whose thoughts were guided by sensuality and hedonism, Brahe is widely considered, widely popular, and still respected as a founder of science. In the Western world, many grew up in an educational system which, for the most part, has regarded the development of science and knowledge as largely the product of some vague concept of Judeo-Christian belief system. This generic idea that is the Christianized nations of Europe and their colonial offshoots, which, because they had a theistic foundation which taught that a rational creator made the world in an orderly way, enjoyed an intellectual climate most preferable to scientific study and development. Such a climate produces great scientific minds, or so-called scientific minds, like Isaac Newton, Galileo, Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Edison, and Albert Newton, and the rest of others. In other words, all of the geniuses we learned about in school. However, this worldwide or worldview does not hold up to a decent scrutiny of history. Instead, these men often were just the opposite. Rather than to base their scientific discoveries in rational observation, they often turn towards the occult metaphysical world for answers. Surprisingly, however, it seems that Christians within our modern-day culture were the last to know, preferably to cling to the mythology about the Christian roots of science, because it plays such a large role in their current approach to Christian apologetics. Notwithstanding, in subjects such as creationism, where so many geologists and astronomers turn to in hopes of vindicating the Genesis account, Christians completely swallow the birth of modern human secularism. However, if such Christians were willing to lay down their rose-colored glasses and give up their slanted views of scientific history in Europe, America, and the West, they would see that real science is really based in alchemy and Kabbalah. In fact, most theoretical science traces back to the occult mystic schools, rooted in what they prefer to be a religion rather than science. Another concern that Christians ought to have with respect to the root of theoretical and cosmological science is its ties to Hermetic philosophy. towards the beginning of what we know as the Renaissance in Europe. The Europeans' interest in the historical figure of Hermes Trismegistus, sheds an incredible amount of light on how ancient esoteric teachings penetrated Europe and gave rise to the period known as the Renaissance of Enlightenment and finally the scientific and industrial revolution. It is rather outstanding to learn just how highly regarded the figure of Hermes Trismegistus was. In the European Renaissance, he was considered by scholars, even St. Thomas Aquinas, to be just as literal a figure in history, but pagan Egyptian history as Moses of the Hebrew scripture. In fact, some regarded him to have the same status as Abraham. So here we have a figure in history, Hermes Trismegistus, a pagan magician from antiquity, who somehow comes to receive incredible favored treatment by Europeans, Christians, theologians, and scholars alongside Europeans, who was of course much more deeply attracted to the occult elements of this tradition. And so in the 15th century, we have Italian scholars in Catholic Greece, Marsilio Ficino, who had been commissioned by a wealthy Medici family to translate the works of Plato. Yet, when the Medici family suddenly came into possession of the Greek manuscript said to be the writings of the magnificent Hermes, Ficino was ordered to hold his work on Plato and translate the Hermetic text with utmost priority. The result was the work known thereafter as Corpus Hermeticum. This had far-reaching effect on Renaissance thinking. It was this work along with the Kabbalah that had the greatest impact on the thinking of Copernicus. Moreover, while Corpus Hermeticum contained a fair amount of more philosophical ideological content, it also contained description of outright rituals such as how to summon astral energy from above and animate stone idols. Needless to say, it was quite deserving of the categorization of witchcraft. Another prominent figure with the rise of Copernicanism, whose Hermetic influence has been thoroughly documented and well known, is Giovanni Bruno, who first proposed that the stars are distant suns. According to historians, he was born at the stake for his beliefs. Copernicus himself referred to Hermes in quotes about the sun. In the middle of all sights, the sun, enthroned in the most beautiful temple. Could we place a luminary in any better position from which he can illuminate the whole at once? He is rightly called the Lamb, the mind, the ruler of the universe, the visible God, the all-seeing. So the sun sits as upon a royal throne, ruling his children, the planet which circle around him. Clearly, this man, Copernicus, Isaac Newton, and others were heavily influenced by the occult teachings. This man, sorcerer. Exodus chapter 22 verse 18 tells us, "Do not allow a sorcerer or a witch to live, but we have allowed them to hijack and warp the very perception that we have about the world." Sorcery uses spells, divination, and speaking to spirit, and is clearly taught against in the Bible. For example, 2 Chronicles chapter 33 verse 6, King Manasseh is condemned for his many evil practices, including sorcery and his burning of his son as an offering to the valley of Hinnom. God condemns him for practicing sorcery. The Apostle Paul lists sorcery as one of the sinful practices that mark the lives of unbelievers when he said, "Now the works of the flesh are evident: sexual immorality, impurity, sensuality, idolatry, sorcery, enmity, and strife. All of these I warn you, as I warned you before, that those who do such things will not inherit the kingdom of God." Galatians chapter 5 verse 19 to 21 translate the word sorcery as pharmakia, where we get our word pharmacy. In Paul's day, the word primarily means dealing in poison or drug use, or even alchemy, amulets, charms, and conjuring the power of the occult. Isaac Newton, Tycho Brahe, and other so-called scientists were quite taken with the occult. These are the same men who help to shape our schools and doctrines about the nature of our world. We would not believe that our world is spinning and was formed by gravity had we not had their theories to lean on. However, can we really trust our educational system to the doctrines of these men of magic? It is no question that NASA is practicing deception. The 1969 moon landing was very suspicious. NASA has also been shown as a very deceptive organization. Most of what they give us concerning the nature of the cosmos is computer generated. Ironically, the very word NASA in itself means to deceive. Indeed, Strong's defined this word as Strong 57537, North Shore, a primitive root to lead astray, that is, mentally to delude, or morally to seduce, beguile, deceived, greatly or utterly. So, the occultists have been the ones to lead us into this new brave world of science, and most of the science that they have done is still very questionable. NASA uses CGI to make us believe that the Earth is a globe. Evolution is impossible to prove. Gravity cannot be explained. We have never been past 7 miles deep in the Earth, yet we say that the Earth has a core 4,000 miles beneath the Earth. Could all of our foundational beliefs be false and concentrated in the occult beliefs of a few men who we thought were scientists, but instead were sorcerers? We may never know until we reach heaven. However, all the evidence points to the conclusion that the real inspiration behind these men of science was not the Holy Spirit. Let us continue to expose them and take the message to those who are still asleep, so that they may wake up to the truth. Kindly drop your thoughts on these so-called men of science, whom we have now found out to be men of the occult, instead in the comment section. Please like and share this video with your friends and family members on social media and everywhere if you enjoy it. Remember to also subscribe to my channel if you are visiting for the first time, and then hit the bell icon so that you will not miss any updates. Thank you for watching this video. See you in the next video. Peace.
Let's go.
Here's the question: has science discovered God? Well, Einstein didn't believe it was possible, but Stephen Hawking said it might be the greatest scientific discovery of all time. So what discovery has baffled the greatest scientific minds the past century? And why has it caused them to rethink the origin of our universe? Well, new and more powerful telescopes have unlocked mysteries about our universe never before revealed, giving us amazing new scientific insight into the origin of life. Has science discovered God? But wait a minute, hasn't science proven we don't need God to explain the universe? What is it about this discovery that is so fundamentally different? And why has it stunned the scientific world? Well, this discovery, along with what molecular biologists have learned about the sophisticated coding within DNA, have many scientists now admitting that the universe and life itself appear to be part of a grand design. One cosmologist put it this way: many scientists, when they admit their views, incline toward the design argument. Surprisingly, many scientists who are now talking about God have no religious belief whatsoever. So what are these stunning discoveries that have scientists suddenly speaking of God? Well, there are 3 revolutionary discoveries from the fields of astronomy and molecular biology that really stand out. 1. The universe had a beginning. The universe is just right for life. 3. DNA coding reveals intelligence. The statements leading scientists have made about these discoveries may shock you. Let's take a look. The universe had a one-time beginning. Since the dawn of civilization, man is gazed in awe at the stars, wondering what they are and how they got there. Although on a clear night the unaided human eye can see only about 6,000 stars, Hubble and other powerful telescopes reveal there are a billion stars clustered in over 100 billion galaxies. In fact, our sun is like one grain of sand amidst the world's beaches, but prior to the 20th century the majority of scientists believed our own Milky Way galaxy was the entire universe and that only about 100 million stars existed. All scientists in the past believed that our universe never had a beginning. They believed that mass, space and energy that compose our entire universe had always existed. But in the early 20th century astronomer Edwin Hubble discovered that the universe is expanding. Rewinding the process mathematically, he calculated that everything in the universe including matter, energy, space and even time itself actually had a beginning. Well, shock waves hit the scientific community. Many scientists including Einstein reacted negatively. In what Einstein later called, the biggest blunder of my life, he fudged the equations to avoid the implication that the universe had a beginning. Well, perhaps the most vocal adversaria. The idea that the universe had a beginning was the British astronomer Sir Frederick Hoyle, who sarcastically nicknamed the creation event a Big Bang. He stubbornly held to his steady-state theory that the universe had always existed. Well, so did Einstein and other scientists until the evidence for a beginning became overwhelming. The logical conclusion was like the proverbial elephant in the room, namely, that something or someone beyond scientific investigation must have started it all. Then finally, in 1992 the COBE satellite experiments proved that the universe really did have a one-time beginning in an incredible flash of light and energy. Although some scientists called it the moment of creation, most preferred referring to it as the Big Bang. Astronomer Robert Jastrow tries to help us imagine how it all began. The picture suggests the explosion of a cosmic hydrogen bomb. The instant in which the cosmic bomb exploded marked the birth of the universe. So the conclusion is, everything in the universe came from nothing. Science is unable to tell us what or who caused the universe to begin, but some believe it clearly points to a creator. British theorist Edward Milne wrote a mathematical treatise on relativity which concluded by saying, as to the first cause of the universe in the context of expansion, that is left to the reader to insert. But our picture is incomplete without him. Another British scientist Edmund Whittaker attributed the beginning of our universe to divine will, constituting nature from nothingness. Many scientists were struck by the parallel of a one-time creation event from nothing with the biblical creation account in Genesis 1:1. Prior to this discovery, many scientists regard the biblical account of creation from nothing as unscientific. Although he called himself an agnostic, Robert Jastrow was compelled by the evidence to admit, now we see how the astronomical evidence leads to a biblical view of the origin of the world. Another similar statement came from agnostic George Smoot, the Nobel Prize-winning scientist in charge of the COBE experiment. He put it like this, there is no doubt that a parallel exists between the Big Bang as an event and the Christian notion of creation from nothing. Scientists who used to scoff at the Bible's account of creation are now admitting that the biblical concept of creation from nothing has been right all along. Cosmologists who specialized in the study of the universe and its origins soon realized that a chance cosmic explosion could never bring about life any more than a nuclear bomb would unless it was precisely engineered to do so, and that meant the designer must have planned it. They began using words like super-intellect, creator and even supreme being to describe this designer. Why? Is this because the universe is finely tuned for life? Physicists calculated that for life to exist, gravity and the other laws of physics that govern our universe needed to be intricately tuned just right, or our universe couldn't exist. For instance, did you know that if the expansion rate of the universe had been slightly weaker, gravity would have held all matter back into a big crunch? We're not talking about merely a 1 or 2% reduction in the universe's expansion rate. Stephen Hawking writes, if the rate of expansion 1 second after the Big Bang had been smaller by even 1 part in 100,000 million, the universe would have elapsed before it ever reached its present size. Well, on the flip side, if the expansion rate had been a mere fraction greater than it was, all galaxies, stars and planets could never have formed and we wouldn't be here. And for life to exist, the conditions in our solar system and our own planet also need to be just right. For example, we all realize that without an atmosphere of oxygen none of us would be able to breathe, and without oxygen, water couldn't exist. Without water there would be no rainfall for our crops. Other elements such as hydrogen, nitrogen, sodium, carbon, calcium and phosphorus are also essential for life, but that alone is not all that's needed for life to exist. The size, temperature, relative proximity and chemical makeup of our planet, sun and moon also need to be just right, and there are dozens of other conditions that needed to be exquisitely fine-tuned or we wouldn't be here to think about it. The scientists who believe in God may have expected such fine-tuning, but atheists and agnostics were unable to explain the remarkable quote-unquote coincidences. The theoretical physicist Stephen Hawking, an agnostic, writes, the remarkable fact is that the values of these numbers seem to have been very finely adjusted to make possible the development of life. It all brings us to one question: the universe accident or miracle? But couldn't this fine-tuning be attributed to chance? After all, odds makers know that even long shots can eventually win at the racetrack, and against heavy odds, lotteries are eventually won by someone. So what are the odds against a human life existing by chance from a random explosion in cosmic history? Well, for human life to be possible from a Big Bang utterly defies the laws of probability. One astronomer calculates the odds at less than 1 chance in a trillion. In other words, it would be far easier for a blindfolded person in one try to discover one specially marked grain of sand out of all the beaches of the world. Look at it this way: the odds of one random Big Bang producing life as we know it would be like one person winning over 1,000 consecutive mega-million-dollar lotteries after purchasing only a single ticket for each. Not very likely, really. Quite impossible unless it was fixed by someone behind the scenes, which is what everyone would think, and that is what many scientists are concluding: someone behind the scenes designed and created the universe. Well, this new understanding of how miraculous human life is in our universe led the agnostic astronomer George Greenstein to ask, is it possible that suddenly, without intending to, we've stumbled upon the scientific proof of the existence of a supreme being? However, as an agnostic, Greenstein maintains his faith in science rather than a creator to ultimately explain our origins. Robert Jastrow explains why some scientists are reluctant to accept the transcendent creator. He says there is a kind of religion in science. It is a religion of a person who believes there is order and harmony in the universe. This religious faith to scientists is violated by the discovery that the world had a beginning under conditions in which the known laws of physics are not valid, and as a product of forces or circumstances we cannot discover. When that happens, the scientist has lost control. If you really examine the implications, he would be traumatized. Well, it's understandable why scientists like Greenstein and Hawking seek other explanations rather than attribute our finely tuned universe to a creator. Hawking speculates that other unseen and unprovable universes may exist, increasing the odds that one of them, like ours, is perfectly fine-tuned for life. However, since his proposal is speculative and outside of verification, it can hardly be called scientific, although he's also an agnostic. British astrophysicist Paul Davies dismisses Hawking's idea as too speculative. He writes, such a belief must rest on faith rather than observation. Although Hawking continues leading the charge to explore purely scientific explanations for our origins, other scientists, including many agnostics, have acknowledged what appears to be overwhelming evidence for a creator. Astronomer Frederick Hoyle wrote a common-sense interpretation of the facts. Suggests that the super-intellect has monkeyed with physics as well as chemistry and biology, and that there are no blind forces worth speaking about in nature. Although Einstein wasn't religious and didn't believe in a personal God, He called the genius behind the universe and intelligence of such superiority that compared with it all the systematic thinking and acting of human beings is an utterly insignificant reflection. Atheist Christopher Hitchens, who spent much of his life writing and debating against the existence of God, was most perplexed by the fact that life couldn't exist if things were different by just 1 degree or 1 hair. Davis acknowledges, "There is for me powerful evidence that there is something going on behind it all. It seems as though somebody has fine-tuned nature's numbers to make the universe. The impression of design is overwhelming, but astronomy is not the only area where science has discovered evidence for design. There is another discovery: DNA, the language of life, as recent as 1953. Molecular biologists discovered intricately complex design in the microscopic world of DNA. This tiny molecule has been called the brains behind each cell in our body as well as every other living thing, yet the more they discover about DNA, the more amazed they are at the brilliance behind it. Scientists who believe the material world is all that exists, like Richard Dawkins, argued DNA evolved by natural selection without a creator, yet even most ardent evolutionists admit that the origin of DNA's intricate complexity is unexplainable. The DNA's intricate complexity caused its co-discoverer Francis Crick to believe that it could never have originated on Earth naturally. Crick and evolutionists believe life is too complex to have originated on Earth and must have come from outer space. He wrote, "An honest man armed with all the knowledge available to us now could only state that in some sense the origin of life appears at the moment to almost be a miracle. So many are the conditions which would have had to have been satisfied to get it going. The coding behind DNA reveals such intelligence that it staggers the imagination. A mere pinhead volume of DNA contains information equivalent to a stack of paperback books that would encircle the Earth 5,000 times, and DNA operates like a language with its own extremely complex software code." Microsoft founder Bill Gates says that the software of DNA is far more complex than any software we have ever developed. Richard Dawkins and other evolutionary biologists believe that all this complexity originated through natural selection. Yet, as Crick, a Nobel Prize winner, remarked, natural selection could never have produced the first molecule. Many scientists believe that the coding within the DNA molecule points to an intelligence far exceeding what could have occurred by natural causes. In the early 21st century, noted atheist Anthony Flew's lifelong unbelief came to an abrupt end when he studied the remarkable intelligence behind DNA. Flew explains what changed his position. "What I think the DNA material has done is to show that intelligence must have been involved in getting these extraordinarily diverse elements together. The enormous complexity by which the results were achieved looked to me like the work of intelligence. It now seems to me that the finding of more than 50 years of DNA research have provided materials for a new and enormously powerful argument to design." Although Flew is not a Christian, he admitted that the software behind DNA is far too complex to have originated without a designer. All this scientific evidence leads us to honestly consider that life and the universe have the fingerprints of a creator. Are scientists now convinced that a creator has left his fingerprints on the universe? Although many scientists are still bent on squeezing God out of the universe, most recognize the religious implications of these new discoveries. In his book, The Grand Design, Stephen Hawking, who doesn't believe in a personal God, attempts to explain why the universe doesn't need God. Yet when faced with the evidence, even Hawking has also admitted there must be religious overtones, but I think most scientists prefer to shy away from the religious side of it. As an agnostic, world-renowned astronomer Robert Jastrow had no Christian agenda behind his conclusions. However, he freely acknowledges the compelling case for a creator. He writes of the shock and despair experienced by scientists who thought they had squeezed God out of their world. These are his words for the scientist who has lived by his faith in the power of reason. The story ends like a bad dream. He has scaled the mountains of ignorance. He's about to conquer the highest peak, and as he pulls himself over the final rock, he is greeted by a band of theologians who have been sitting there for centuries. So, what if after all there is a creator? If there is a super-intelligent creator, the question arises, what is he like? Is he just some cosmic force like in Star Wars, or is he a personal being like us? Well, since we're personal and relational beings, wouldn't the one who created us also be personal and relational? Many scientists like Arthur Al-Shabaab, professor of physics at Stanford University and winner of the Nobel Prize in Physics, believed that these new discoveries provide compelling evidence for a personal God. He writes, "It seems to me that when confronted with the marvels of life in the universe, one must ask why and not just how. They're the only possible answers are religious. I find a need for God in the universe and in my own life. If God is personal and since He has given us the ability to communicate, wouldn't we expect Him to communicate with us and let us know why we are here?" As we've seen, science is unable to answer questions about God and the purpose for life. However, since the Bible was right about creation from nothing, might it also be trustworthy regarding God, life and purpose? That 2,000 years ago a man set foot on our planet who claimed to have the answer to life. Although his time on Earth was brief, his impact changed the world and is still felt today. His name is Jesus Christ. The eyewitnesses to Jesus Christ tell us that He continually demonstrated creative power over nature's laws. They tell us He was wise, humble and compassionate. He healed the lame, deaf and blind. He stopped raging storms instantly. It created food your nation began, for it was through Him that everything was made, with her spiritual or material seen or you. Then it was necessary for Him to rise from the dead so that we too could have life after death as the Creator. Jesus certainly would have power over life and death, and those closest to Him claimed they saw Him alive after He died and was buried for 3 days. If they were wrong, then Christianity has been founded upon a lie, but if they were right, such a miracle would substantiate all Jesus said about God Himself and us. But must we take the resurrection of Jesus Christ by faith alone, or is there solid historical evidence? Several skeptics began investigations into the historical record to prove the resurrection account false. What did they discover? Air your views and comment, subscribe and share.
Hello everyone, thank you for joining me in this episode of the Flathead video. I will consider one of the most recent topics that have been of interest to me. We are going to look at some posts or some articles posted by NASA and its allies to the facts we are going to discuss today. I will also consider an experiment carried out by a YouTube channel by Steve Matthews of Teeth of the Lamb YouTube channel. He carried out an amazing moon phases experiment that you are going to see here. You use it as part of our confirmation that space is full of water. So let's actually get started. Let me call up these posts. Now, as you will see here, look at this. NASA missions provide new insight into ocean walls in our solar system. Now, what does that mean? Into ocean walls in our solar system. That is to say, there is a likelihood or a tactical confirmation that space is full of water.
Presented by Science at NASA.
Now let's look at this. 2 veteran NASA missions are providing new details about icy ocean-bearing moons of Jupiter and Saturn, further heightening the scientific interest of these and other ocean worlds in our solar system and beyond. The findings are presented in papers published Thursday by researchers with NASA's Cassini mission to Saturn and Hubble Space Telescope. Now, is that a tactical acceptance or a tactical confirmation that space is full of water? You may be a doubting Thomas and be feeling that flat earthers are flooding your timelines with this belief that space is full of water. Most of the space videos you have been watching are filmed in Hollywood studios or somewhere in swimming pools around the United States of America. and you think they are in space. They are actually in a swimming pool somewhere, because no one has ever been to space. And NASA have even confirmed that, but that is not the subject of our discussion today. Now let's look at this also, another post here. Water everywhere in our solar system, but what does that mean for life? What does that mean for life? There was much excitement when NASA recently revealed new details about the oceans that lurk beneath the surface of Saturn's tiny moon Enceladus and Jupiter's Europa. Why the excitement? They have several times said that flat earthers are lying that space is full of water. So now it is traces, as confirmed by most of their articles here, that space is full of water. So why the excitement? That's not my point of concern actually. Now look at this article as well. The famous Eye of God nebula may actually be weeping tears of water. Weeping tears of water. This picture, as you can see here, this is the famous Eye of God nebula that it's presumed is weeping tears of water. And then where is the water coming from if space is not occupied majorly by water? Let's look at this. Is it something of interest? It is one of the most iconic celestial images in astronomy, the Ilai Helix Nebula. Ironically, the incredible harsh conditions within this dying sun-like star are producing a molecular integral for the formation of water, a process that could be repeated across the cosmos. Tactically, if at all, I have never believed NASA to be an agency that is for our own good. They are actually government's machinery to embezzle taxpayers' money. That's my view. Alright, at this point, the image you are seeing here, or this screen you are seeing here, is a screen from a video posted by Steve Matthews. He titled it Moon Phases Experiment Flat Earth by Steve Matthews. The YouTube channel, as you can see, is Teeth of the Lamb. Teeth of the Lamb, a very amazing image here. Avatar there, you can see there. Now let's look at this interesting experiment he carried out here, showing moon phases and how they, in my view, they support the fact that space is full of water. Now let's look at this. Let me not bore you with the preambles.
But maybe this will give you some ideas. This is what I think is happening, or something very, very similar. Good luck. I'm not saying this is the way it is, but this is the way I think it is. This is my simulated moon phases. The curve on this glass is way too concaved, but if it was less, it would work a lot better for showing the phases of the moon. Anyway, that's all I could find to use.
This goes on till about timestamp 6:30. So if you want to skip ahead to the nighttime sky, but I wanted to put all these clips in here in case somebody wants to cut them out and use them for another video. So I put all of it down. But yeah, timestamp 6:30 is the nighttime sky.
The curve on this glass is way too concaved, but if it was less, it would work a lot better for showing the phases of the moon. Anyway, that's all I could find to use.
Alright, what you have just seen is an experiment or a demonstration showing phases of the moon. And as you could see in the video there, you will discover that as his simulated moon enters the waters, it forms a concave shape of the moon, which we normally see in the sky, both daytime sky and nighttime sky. So I believe, with the evidence of the articles posted by NASA and others stating that the universe is and space is full of water. So with this experiment and combined with the articles we've displayed earlier, it is safe to conclude that space is full of water, and to also conclude that you have been thoroughly deceived and indoctrinated to believe all that NASA have been saying to you. And at this point, with a great awakening happening all over the world, it is your fault if you are still left in darkness, and or if you are still left asleep. So I expect all of you who have the opportunity to watch this video to be well awake and consider to research flat earth. Carry out research. Don't rely only on YouTube videos that we are posting, even though that's a very good source of information for you about flat earth. But you can on your own also research other sites, other areas. There are books written by most flat earthers and other researchers. You can equally consult some of those books. There are a lot of questions to be answered, but no answers. So we are not going to dive into that today. We'll look at some of those topics in subsequent videos we are going to post. But for today, thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you guys. Thank you so much. Please consider visiting Moon Phases Experiment Teeth of the Lamb YouTube channel. You are going to see the link is in my description. Please consider visiting his channel to see most of other amazing videos he has there. Thank you guys for watching. Please, if you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and share with your friends and family on social media and elsewhere. Please don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you